The smell hits you before the land does. You are still on the water. The ship is still moving beneath you. But something has changed in the air, something green and cold and enormous that has nothing to do with the ocean you have spent 66 days crossing. You are standing at the rail, and the smell is coming off the trees, thousands of them, millions of them. A continent of them pressing down to the water's edge and then stopping, as if the river itself told them to go no further. This is not France. You knew that. You were told that. But knowing a thing and standing at the rail of a ship with the smell of it filling your lungs are two different things entirely. You have never seen so many trees in your life. There is a city on the cliff. You can see it from the water. Stone buildings, a wooden palisade, a church steeple catching the August light. It is smaller than you expected. It is smaller than any city you have known. The harbor below it is crowded with canoes that move faster than they should, paddled by men whose skin is a different color than yours, whose clothing is skins, whose movements on the water are unhurried and completely certain. You watch them and you do not look away. You have never seen anything like them. You will not pretend otherwise. The year is 1663. You are 21 years old. Your name is Marie. You were born in a parish on the eastern edge of Paris where the streets are narrow enough to touch both walls with your arms outstretched. Your father was a day laborer. He died when you were 11. Your mother died the following winter. You were placed in the Hôpital Général de Paris, the great hospital on the left bank where the poor, the orphaned, and the unwanted are housed together under the king's care. You have lived there for 9 years. You know the smell of that place. You know the sound of it at night. You know exactly how many steps it takes to walk from the women's dormitory to the chapel. You will not be going back. You are here because a man named Jean Talon, the intendant of New France, sent letters to Paris asking for women. The colony is bleeding. Men come to New France to trap furs, and they stay because the fur trade requires it, but they do not stay long enough to build anything permanent, and the colony does not grow because there are almost no women. The ratio in some regions is 6 men to every 1 woman. 6. The farms go unplanted. The children are not born. The settlements exist, but they do not put down roots. The king noticed. Louis XIV is 24 years old, and he is rebuilding France in his own image, and New France is part of that image, and New France is failing. And so he has done what kings do when they need something done quickly. He has organized it. He has funded it. He has sent ships. You are one of approximately 130 women on this ship. You came from the Hôpital Général. Others came from religious houses, from poor families in Normandy, from the streets of La Rochelle, from the provinces. You are not criminals. You are not being punished. The king is paying for your passage. He will give you a small dowry upon your arrival, 50 livres, which is more money than you have ever held in your hands at one time. He is, in the language of the program, giving his daughters a future. You are a Filles du Roi, a daughter of the king. You have 3 days to find a husband. This is Quiet History at Bedtime. If this is your kind of story, a subscribe means everything right now. Every detail in this story comes from the historical record. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. The ship docks in the lower harbor beneath the cliff of Cap Diamant. The dock is wood, recently built, and it moves slightly under your feet in a way that makes your legs adjust automatically. Your legs have been adjusting to the motion of the ship for 66 days. They do not know yet that the motion has stopped. This is a real thing that happens to sailors and passengers who cross the ocean. The inner ear holds the memory of the waves. For days after you step onto land, your body will continue to compensate for a ship that is no longer moving. You will feel the roll of the Atlantic in your legs while you are standing perfectly still on solid ground. You will feel it in the night when you lie down to sleep. The body does not release the ocean quickly. You are not the only woman who steps onto the dock and immediately grabs the arm of the woman beside her. The woman beside you is Isabelle. She is from Rouen. She is 19. She was a linen weaver's daughter, and she has more practical knowledge than you do. She can spin, she can weave, she can read a small amount. She knows how to salt and preserve a side of pork. You have none of these skills. What you have is 9 years of institutional life. You know how to manage cold, how to manage hunger, how to organize tasks and complete them without complaint, how to move through a system without being noticed. These are not the skills anyone names when they list what a frontier wife requires, but they are, in fact, exactly the skills that will keep you alive here. You do not know that yet. What you know right now is that the dock is solid, and your legs feel wrong, and the air smells like pine and river water, and something else you cannot name. Animal, maybe, or wood smoke, or both. There is a man at the end of the dock who is reading names from a list. You file past him, and he reads your name, and you say yes, and he makes a mark. This is the accounting. The Crown has paid for your transport, and it is tracking its investment. Every Filles du Roi is registered upon arrival. Name, approximate age, parish of origin, general health assessment. This record will be kept. It will eventually be studied by historians who want to understand what happened here in this river valley in the second half of the 17th century. Right now, it is just a man with ink-stained fingers reading from a sheet of paper in the August heat. The heat surprises you. You expected cold. Everyone in Paris told you New France was a place of killing winters, and it is. You will learn exactly how true that is in a few months. But August in Quebec is warm, warmer than Paris in August, and Paris in August is warm enough. The sun comes off the river in flat white sheets. You are wearing 2 layers of wool because that is what you owned when you boarded the ship in June. You are already sweating. You follow the other women up the hill. The cliff of Cap Diamant rises 70 meters above the harbor. There is a road cut into the cliff face, not a gentle road, a road that goes up, and you climb it with the rest of the women from the ship, carrying the bundle that contains everything you own. What you own is not much. 2 dresses, 1 brown, 1 dark blue, both of which were given to you by the program administrators in Paris before departure. A woolen apron, a small knife with a bone handle, a comb, a needle and thread, a pound of salt wrapped in cloth, a prayer book, and 50 livres in coin, which are sewn into the hem of your brown dress, and which you have checked every single morning of the voyage to make sure they are still there. They are still there. You climb. Quebec City at the top of the cliff is not Paris. You knew this, but the distance between knowing it and standing in it is the same distance as the one between knowing New France is far away and actually being here. The upper town has perhaps 500 buildings, stone mostly, or half-timbered wood. The streets are not paved. There is a cathedral under construction, Notre Dame de Quebec, and the scaffolding against its stone walls is the tallest structure you can see from where you are standing. The streets smell of horses and mud, and the particular sharp smell of wood being cut. There are men everywhere. Not dangerous men, working men, soldiers, laborers, merchants, farmers who have come into town for the market. They stop what they are doing when the women from the ship come up through the gate. You feel their eyes without looking for them. You have been told about this. The women who briefed you in Paris said, "When you arrive, the men will look." They said it plainly, without apology, because it is true and you will need to be prepared for it. You are prepared. What you are not prepared for is how young many of them are, and how uncertain. They are looking at you the same way you are looking at them, with the particular expression of someone who is trying very hard not to appear afraid. You are taken, along with the other women, to the Ursuline convent. The Ursulines arrived in Quebec in 1639. They are one of the oldest institutions in the colony, and they run the school and hospital, and have, since the Filles du Roi program began, served as the temporary house for women arriving from France, while the business of matching and marriage is organized. The convent is stone. It has a garden. It has a chapel that smells of beeswax and incense in a way that reaches something at the back of your throat you were not expecting to feel. You have not been inside a church this clean in years. The nun who receives you at the door is efficient and kind in the way that women who run large institutions are kind, with genuine warmth but without excess sentiment, because excess sentiment does not run institutions. She shows you to the dormitory where you will sleep tonight and the next night, and, if things do not move as quickly as they are meant to, the night after that. The beds are narrow and clean. The ceiling is low. There are 8 beds in this room, and you will share it with 7 other women from the ship. You sit on the edge of your bed and take off your shoes and set them on the floor. Isabelle sits on the bed across from you. She has a mark on her jaw from where she slept on her arm wrong during the voyage, and she keeps touching it without noticing. Neither of you says anything for a while. Outside the window, the city is making its ordinary sounds. The sound of it is different from Paris, less dense, fewer voices, fewer wheels, fewer bells. The sounds are spaced further apart, and between them there is something that Paris never has: quiet, real quiet. The kind that comes from there simply not being very many people in this place yet. 66 days ago, you boarded a ship in La Rochelle. You stood on the dock in La Rochelle, and you watched France get smaller. You watched it until it was a line, and then until the line was gone, and then there was nothing but gray water in every direction. For 66 days there was nothing but gray water. Some days were calm, and some days were not. One storm, 3 weeks into the crossing, lasted 4 days, and was the most frightening 4 days of your life. Water came under the hatch covers. You were sick. Everyone was sick. The women lay in the hold, pressed against each other, the ship rolling so steeply that the overhead lantern swung hard enough to crack against the beam, and you held onto Isabelle's arm and she held onto yours, and neither of you prayed out loud, but both of you were praying. The ship did not sink. There were 134 of you when the ship left La Rochelle. There were 131 when it arrived. 3 women died during the crossing, one from fever, one from complications that began as a cough and did not stop, one in circumstances no one spoke about directly. They were buried at sea, which is to say their bodies were given to the Atlantic, which is to say that they crossed an ocean too but did not arrive. You knew all 3 of them, not well enough to know their names. You do not think about this constantly, but you do not think about it either. The St. Lawrence River is not an ordinary river. It is 3 kilometers wide at Quebec City, and it widens to 400 kilometers at its mouth, where it opens into the Gulf. It drains the entire interior of the continent. It is the reason France wanted this territory at all, because the river is the highway into the interior, and the interior is full of beaver, and beaver fur is what Europe wants in 1663. And whoever controls the river controls the fur trade, and whoever controls the fur trade controls a significant portion of the wealth of the New World. This is the calculation that brought you here. You are not told this in precisely these terms, but you understand it, roughly, the way anyone understands the logic of where they have ended up. Someone wanted something. You were useful to that wanting, and so here you are. What you were told, more specifically, is this. New France has perhaps 3,000 colonists. The colony needs to grow rapidly. The king has decided to make it grow through immigration and through the encouragement of large families, and the large families require women, and there are not enough women in New France, and so the program was designed and funded, and you were recruited, and here you are. The program began in 1663, which is this year, which means you are among the first. This matters more than you know. The women who arrive in the first years of the program will have more time, more land, more opportunity to build something real than the women who come later, not because of anything they did, because of when they came. Between 1663 and 1673, approximately 800 women will make this crossing. Not all at once, in ships of 100 or more, year by year, the numbers filling in the gaps that the colony cannot close any other way. The women will come from Paris, from Normandy, from the Loire Valley, from Poitou. They will be weavers' daughters, and orphans, and daughters of minor tradesmen and women from the religious houses. They will cross the same ocean you crossed. They will stand on the same dock. They will sit in this same garden. And the colony will grow. The women who stand in this garden in 1663 and 1664 and 1665 will have children, and those children will have children, and 3.5 centuries later, a significant portion of the francophone population of Quebec, hundreds of thousands of people, will be able to trace a line directly back to a woman who stood where you are standing, in the garden of the Ursuline convent, on a warm August morning, waiting for the gate to open. You do not know any of this yet. What you know is that the program began in 1663, which is this year, which means you are among the first. The nun brings a supper of bread, pottage, and salt fish. You eat it all. The bread is made from wheat grown in the fields around Quebec City, wheat that was planted in spring by settlers who have been here long enough to know how to plant in this ground. The pottage has onions and dried peas and a small amount of salt pork. The fish is cod, dried and salted, which is the same fish you have eaten your entire life in Paris because it is the cheapest fish available. and it travels well, and it keeps. Quod, in a convent in Quebec, some things do not change with the continent. After supper there is compline, the evening prayer in the chapel. You sit in the row of new arrivals, and you follow the responses from memory, and you listen to the sound of the organ. The organ in the Ursuline chapel is not large, but it is real, and it is the first music you have heard in 66 days that was not someone singing to keep their spirits up in the hold of a ship. The sound fills the chapel and settles somewhere behind your ribs. After compline, you go back to the dormitory. You check the coins in your hem. You lie down on the narrow bed. The ceiling is low and stone, and in the candlelight it has the same tone as the ceiling of the dormitory in the Hôpital Général. And for a moment the distance between there and here collapses, and you are 11 years old, and your mother has just died, and the nun at the hospital is leading you to the bed where you will sleep for the next 9 years. You remember the exact texture of that moment, the particular quality of the grief, not sharp, not dramatic, but settling like ash. You are not 11 years old. You are 21. You are on a different continent. The ceiling is the same gray as the one in Paris, and it is also not the same at all. Isabel whispers your name from across the room. Are you asleep? No. Me neither. You lie there for a while in the quiet. The city outside is quieter than any city you have ever tried to sleep in. No carts on cobblestones, no arguments through thin walls. No bells counting the hours in overlapping rings from 17 different churches. Here there are 2 bells. You heard them. They are not close enough to be intrusive. Through the window, which is unshuttered because it is August and the air is warm, you can hear the river, not the sound of waves. The St. Lawrence does not make that sound here, not like the ocean, but a low, continuous sound that is the sound of enormous amounts of water moving past this place without stopping. The river is going somewhere. It has always been going somewhere. It was going somewhere 10,000 years before this city existed on this cliff, and it will be going somewhere 10,000 years after. You fall asleep to the sound of it. Tomorrow the men will come. Tomorrow you will stand in the courtyard of the Ursuline convent, and the men of New France will stand across from you, and the process will begin. You know this. The nun explained it at supper, not awkwardly, practically, the way one explains a practical thing. The men are farmers and soldiers and tradesmen, and some are coureurs de bois, the fur traders who work the interior. They have been told that the ship has arrived. They are already making their way to the city. You do not know what you are looking for. You know what you need. You need someone who has land, or the prospect of it. You need someone who will not be unkind. You need someone who understands that you bring something to this. You are not a burden. You are the other half of what it takes to build something in a new place. You bring the crown's dowry. You bring 2 hands and a head that knows how to endure. You bring whatever children the years ahead will bring. Whether this constitutes enough to build a life on, you do not yet know. But you are here, which means you have already done the hardest thing. You crossed an ocean. You stood on a dock at the edge of an unknown world, and you did not turn around. Tomorrow the men will come. Outside, the river keeps moving south toward the Gulf, toward the ocean, toward a France that is now 2 months away by the fastest ship. The river does not move north. It does not move back. You sleep. You are awake before the bells. The room is not dark. Light comes through the window already. The August sky pale and high and cloudless. The kind of sky that means the day will be warm. The 7 other women in the room are asleep. Isabel is on her back, with one arm over her face. The woman in the corner bed, whose name you learned at supper, is Marguerite, and who came from a farm outside Cannes, is curled on her side with her knees drawn up. You sit up and put your feet on the floor. The floor is stone, and it is cool, the way stone floors are always cool, no matter the season. The way stone holds cold in its body like a memory it cannot release. You sit with your feet flat on it, and your hands in your lap, and you breathe. Today the men will come. You have been saying this to yourself since you arrived. You said it last night before you fell asleep, and you are saying it now, and the saying of it has not yet produced anything useful. You do not feel calm. You do not feel ready. What you feel is the same thing you felt on the dock in La Rochelle before the ship pulled away from France. The particular sensation of a door closing behind you that will not open again. You have made a habit in your life of walking through those doors. You rise and wash your face with the water in the basin, and you dress in the blue dress, which is slightly better than the brown one, which means it is the one for today. You tie your hair back, and you pin it, and you put on your apron, and you look presentable. You look like a woman who can work. In 1663 in New France, this is what looking your best means. There is no one in this colony who will be impressed by a woman who cannot work. The morning prayer is at 6 o'clock. Then breakfast. Bread, porridge made from dried corn, a small cup of cider that is slightly sour but clean. You eat everything. You have been eating everything put in front of you for 9 years, and you do not intend to stop. At 8 o'clock, the nun who received you yesterday gathers the women in the garden. The garden of the Ursuline convent is enclosed by a stone wall on 3 sides, and the convent building on the 4th. It has vegetable beds and a small herb garden and 2 apple trees that are already heavy with unripe fruit. In the center is a space of open ground, tamped flat and dry. This is where you stand. The men are already waiting at the gate. You can see them through the iron bars of the gate before it opens. A loose crowd of perhaps 40 men of various ages, in working clothes, hats in their hands. Some of them are talking to each other. Most of them are looking at the gate. One of them catches your eye through the bars and looks immediately away. The nun explains the process. Her voice is practiced. She has done this before. The program has been running since earlier this year, and this is not the first ship to arrive with women, though it is one of the larger ones. The process is as follows. The gate will open. The men will enter the garden. There is to be no grabbing, no blocking, no following a woman who has moved away from you. The women have the right of first refusal. A woman who says no. The man must accept and move on. A man who does not accept this will be removed. The women also cannot be forced. If a woman ends the day without a match, she will remain at the convent and try again when the next group of men arrives. The nun pauses. She says, "We want this to go well for everyone. The king wants this to go well. This colony needs families. You are all part of something important. Now, let us proceed with dignity." The gate opens. The men come in. It is not a rush. It is more of a sorting, a slow movement of people in a small space, each person trying to get where they want to be without appearing to try. Men move toward women who have caught their eye. Women hold their ground or shift slightly. The garden becomes a series of small conversations that form and break and reform. The man who approaches you first is older than you expected. He is perhaps 50, with a face that has been outside in all weathers for many years. His hands are large and cracked at the knuckles. He asks your name. You tell him. He asks if you are in good health. You say yes. He asks if you can cook. You say yes, which is partially true. You can cook the institutional food of the Hôpital Général, which is basic and filling and not imaginative, but it is food. He nods. He says his name is Théodore. He has a farm on the Île d'Orléans, the island in the river just east of Quebec City. He lost his wife 3 years ago. He has 4 children. 4 children. You say thank you. I need to think. He nods and moves away. This is how refusal works. You do not say no directly. You say you need to think, and the man understands that this means no, and he moves on. The system has a grammar to it. After an hour in the garden, you understand it clearly. The second man is younger, perhaps 25, and he is nervous in a way that is almost endearing. He says his name quickly, and then says he has a land grant on the south shore of the river, and he is building a house, and he would like a wife who is willing to work hard because there is a great deal of work to be done. He says this all in one breath. You ask him what kind of work specifically. He says clearing land, planting, cooking, preserving, helping with the animals in spring. You ask how many animals. He says not yet any, but he intends to get a pig and some chickens this fall. You say you need to think. The third man does not approach you. He is standing near the apple trees, talking to no one, watching the garden with a particular quality of attention that is not aggressive but not passive either. He is somewhere between 30 and 35. He has dark hair and a beard that has been trimmed recently and not entirely successfully. He is wearing a coat that has been repaired in 2 places. You can see the stitching from where you are standing. He looks at you when you look at him. He does not look away. You walk toward him. Later, years later, you will try to explain to yourself why you walked toward him, and you will not have a satisfying answer. It is not that he is the most handsome man in the garden, which he is not. It is not that he said anything remarkable, because he has not said anything yet. It is something in the quality of the attention. He is watching the garden the way a person watches something they are trying to understand. There is thinking happening behind his eyes. You ask his name. Jean, he says, Jean Moreau. You ask what he does. He says, I am a coureur de bois. He pauses, then says, do you know what that is? You say, I know what the words mean, running in the woods. He almost smiles. Close enough, he says. I trade in furs. I go into the interior, sometimes as far as the Pays d'Enhaut, the upper country around the lakes, and I trade with the Huron and the Algonquin for beaver pelts, and I bring the pelts back to Montreal to sell to the companies. You ask how long he is away. He says, it depends on the season, spring through fall. Sometimes. I winter here in the valley, but the trading season is long. You ask where here is specifically. He says he has a house outside Trois-Rivières, which is a settlement upriver from Quebec City, roughly halfway between Quebec and Montreal. He has been granted 12 arpents of land. An arpent is roughly 58 meters, and he has cleared 4 of them. The house is small but solid, and he built it himself. You ask if he has children. No, he says, I was not yet married. You ask why not. He considers this question with more seriousness than you expected. He says, because until this year there was almost no one to marry. He says it without self-pity and without particular emotion, as a statement of fact, which it is. The ratio of men to women in New France in 1663 is approximately 6-to-1. It is not an exaggeration to say that some men have been here for years without any possibility of building a family simply because the women were not here. You look at him for a moment. You ask, when do you leave? For the interior? He says, not until spring. The trading season ends in autumn. I will be here through the winter. You say, I need to think. He nods. You walk back to the center of the garden. You stand there for a moment. Isabelle is nearby, talking to a man with red hair who appears to be telling her something about carpentry. His hands are making the shape of a roof. Marguerite from Cannes is standing with a man who is considerably shorter than her and who appears completely unfazed by this. You think about what you know. You know that the coureurs de bois are not entirely legal. The fur trade in New France is controlled by the Compagnie des Indes Occidentales, the Company of West Indies, which has the monopoly on trade and requires licenses. The coureurs de bois operate partly outside this system, trading independently, which gives them higher margins but also puts them in a complicated position with the colonial administration. Jean did not mention this. You know it because the women in Paris who briefed you on New France mentioned it, briefly, as something to be aware of. You also know that a man who has been in the interior, who has traded with the Huron and the Algonquin, who has built his own house and cleared his own land, has skills that a man with a land grant and no pig yet does not have. 12 arpents, 4 cleared. A house he built himself. Gone in spring. You walk back toward the apple trees. He is still there. You say, I will accept if you are still willing. He says he is. The process after acceptance is practical and swift. There is a notary who has been present in the convent all morning for exactly this purpose. You and Jean go into the convent building, and you sit at a table, and the notary reads you the terms of the marriage contract. The contract specifies the dowry, your 50 livres plus the goods provided by the crown, and the husband's contribution, which in Jean's case is his land, his house, and a sum of 40 livres. The contract also specifies that in the event of the husband's death, the wife retains the shared property. This is not a small thing. It is a real protection, enshrined in the custom of Paris, the legal code that governs New France. A widow in this colony has rights that a widow in many parts of France does not have. The notary reads it to you because you cannot read, and he reads it slowly, and you listen carefully, and when he finishes you say you understand, and you sign your name, or rather, you make your mark, a cross, beside your name where he has written it, and Jean signs his, and the witnesses sign, and it is done. You are engaged to be married. The wedding is 3 days later. In the intervening 3 days, you remain at the Ursuline convent. Jean is in the city, staying with a merchant he knows. You see him once, briefly, in the courtyard of the convent where short supervised visits are permitted. He brings you a small piece of hard candy, maple sugar candy, dark and intensely sweet, which you have never tasted before. You put it in your mouth, and the sweetness of it is startling, not like cane sugar, warmer and earthier. And he is watching your face to see your reaction. You say, "What is this?" He says, "Maple sugar. Do you like it?" You say yes. He nods as if this settles something. You want to ask him, "What are we doing?" You want to ask, "Do you know me at all? Do I know you?" You want to ask the questions that the 3 days between engagement and wedding do not provide enough time to answer. But you do not ask them because they are not questions anyone in your position asks, not because they are wrong questions, but because asking them cannot change anything. You are here. He is here. The notary has already recorded the contract. The wedding takes place in the Notre Dame de Quebec, the cathedral that was still under scaffolding when you arrived, which has been in intermittent construction since 1632 and will continue to be rebuilt and expanded for the next 2 centuries. The interior is not finished. There are exposed beams where the vaulting should be. But there is an altar, and there is a priest, and there are candles, and there are witnesses. Isabel, who married the red-haired carpenter the day before, and a man Jean knows from the fur trade whose name is Pierre. The ceremony takes perhaps 30 minutes. After the ceremony, there is a small gathering at the house of the merchant who has been hosting Jean. There is food. Meat pie, which is called tourtière, and which is filled with pork and onion and spices in a way you have not encountered before, and there is beer brewed locally from grain and hops, and there is a fiddle player who knows 3 songs and plays them in rotation with great enthusiasm. The other guests are perhaps a dozen people, other coureurs de bois, a few tradesmen, the wives of 2 men who have been in the colony for several years and who look at you with a mixture of sympathy and recognition. One of them, a woman named Catherine, who has been in New France for 4 years, sits next to you at the table. She says, "How are you finding it?" You say, "It is very different from what I expected." She says, "Yes. It always is." She tells you things. She tells you quickly and efficiently, the way women pass useful information between each other when there is not much time. She tells you that the winters here are not like anything you have encountered. She says, "Do not underestimate them. The cold is a kind of serious that you have to adjust your understanding of the word serious to accommodate. Wood, you will need much more than you think. Get it stacked before November. 3 cords at minimum for a small house. If Jean leaves for the interior before November, which he may, you make sure the wood is already there." She tells you about food preservation, what can be dried, what should be root-cellared, how to keep a pot of beans going through a cold week without losing them to frost if the fire goes low. She tells you about the Iroquois, that the tension has been high, that there have been raids further upriver, that Trois-Rivières has had incidents. She says this not to frighten you, but because you need to know it. The company recently appealed to the king for military support, and the Carignan-Salière regiment has just been sent, 1,000 soldiers, which is more than a third of the entire colonial population, arriving this very year to deal with the Iroquois threat. She says, "It will be better soon, but be alert." You remember the canoes you saw from the ship. The men paddling them were not the men Catherine is describing. The men she is describing are from a different nation, a different set of circumstances, a different history with the French. You know almost none of this history. You are going to have to learn it. Jean is across the room talking to Pierre and two other men. He laughs at something, and the laugh is genuine and uncalculated, and you watch it happen without him knowing you are watching. You are married to this man. He is going to leave you in the spring for the interior trading season, the Pays d'Enhaut, months of travel. And before that, he will be gone in the autumn to settle accounts in Montreal before the river ices. He is going to go into the interior, into the forest that stretched to the horizon from the deck of the ship, and he will be gone for months, trading with people whose language you do not speak, and whose world you cannot yet imagine, and you will be in the house in Trois-Rivières with the winter coming. Catherine refills your cup. She says, the first winter is the hardest, not because it is the worst weather, though it may be, but because you don't know yet that you can survive it. Once you know that, the rest is just work. You drink the beer. The fiddle player starts his first song again. Outside, the August light is going golden and long across the rooftops of Quebec City. The river below the cliff is catching it and throwing it back, and the whole valley is full of this late afternoon light that has come all the way from somewhere over the ocean to land here, on this house, on this table, on your hands holding a cup of local beer in a city you arrived in 4 days ago. Tomorrow you and John will begin the journey upriver to Trois-Rivières. The journey upriver takes 2 days by canoe, paddled by men who know the river the way you know the streets of your parish in Paris, by instinct, by the memory of repetition, by a knowledge so absorbed into the body it no longer requires thought. The St. Lawrence runs fast in places and slow in others. The current fights you going up and helps you coming down. You will sit in the center of the canoe with your bundle in your lap, and you will watch the shore go past. The cliffs, the trees, the occasional cleared field where a farm has been hewn from the forest, and then the trees again closing back in. Trois-Rivières is the second oldest permanent settlement in New France, founded in 1634. By 1663, it has perhaps 500 inhabitants, smaller than Quebec City, but established, with a church and a market and a wooden palisade that was reinforced 2 years ago after Iroquois raids threatened the settlement's eastern edge. It sits at the confluence of the St. Maurice River and the St. Lawrence, which makes it a natural waypoint for the fur traders coming down from the interior. Jean knows every dock, every warehouse, every face in that market. You know nothing. That will change. You do not know the house. You do not know the town. You do not know the 8 months of winter waiting on the other side of this golden August. What you know is that you have survived the crossing. You have survived the choosing. You have made a contract and spoken vows and eaten a meal at a table with people who will be your neighbors for the rest of your life. You have eaten maple sugar for the first time. The fiddle is playing. Jean catches your eye from across the room. He raises his cup slightly. You raise yours. Outside, the St. Lawrence keeps moving in its great, unhurried way, carrying the summer light toward the sea. In 2 days you will be in Trois-Rivières. In 8 weeks the leaves will turn. In 12 weeks the river will ice over. and Jean will still be there until spring. For now, the fiddle. For now, the beer. For now, this particular August evening that exists only once and then is gone, the way all evenings are gone, the way the summer is already going, one golden hour at a time. The house is smaller than you expected. You knew it would be small. Jean told you it was small. But the house is smaller than small. It is one room, and you stand in the doorway of it for a moment before you step inside, taking it in. One room, a fireplace on the north wall, built from local stone, with a hearth wide enough to cook on, a sleeping platform on the east wall, raised off the ground, a table, 2 chairs, a shelf with a few objects on it, a tin cup, a small iron pot, a knife, a piece of candle in a holder. The floor is packed earth, not stone, not wood. The walls are squared logs with moss and clay chinked between them. The ceiling is low enough that Jean has to angle his head slightly near the center beam. The window is a single opening in the south wall with a shutter that latches from inside. There is no glass. Glass is expensive, and this house was built quickly by a man who was here alone. You step inside. The air inside is cooler than the air outside because the house has been closed for the summer while Jean was trading. It smells of wood smoke and dried grass and something else, an animal smell, faint, from the mouse that has been living here in Jean's absence. You can see its droppings near the shelf. You take off your bundle and set it on the table. Jean is behind you. He says, "I know it is not much." You say, "It is ours." You mean it. Not as reassurance, as a statement of fact. In the Hôpital Général in Paris, you shared a dormitory with 40 women. You have not had a room of your own in 9 years. This room, small as it is, with its earthen floor and its shuttered window and its mouse, is yours. This is not a small thing. The first week in Trois-Rivières is spent learning the shape of the place. Trois-Rivières in 1663 sits on a flat point of land where the Saint-Maurice River runs into the St. Lawrence. The town has a wooden palisade, a defensive wall of upright sharpened logs, and inside it are perhaps 80 or 90 buildings, including the church, the Jesuit residence, a small market, a forge, and the houses of the settlers who have been here long enough to build something permanent. Outside the palisade, along the river, are the farms, cleared land, fields in various stages of cultivation. Houses like yours set back from the river with gardens and wood piles. The wood piles. Jean starts adding to the woodpile the second day you are there. He goes into the woodlot behind the cleared land with an axe, and he cuts and he splits, and you carry and stack, and you do this for a week before he is satisfied. The wood is stacked against the east wall of the house under a simple roof of split boards, and it reaches over your head, 3 cords roughly. Jean says it should be enough. Catherine in Quebec City told you 3 cords at minimum. You make a note of this in the part of your mind that keeps notes. The firewood situation in New France is both simple and not simple. The forests here are vast beyond anything you can conceive. The trees press in on every side, and yet the wood that keeps a house alive through a Quebec winter is a specific kind of work. Hardwood burns longer and hotter than softwood. In the forests around Trois-Rivières there is maple, birch, ash, and oak, all hardwood, all good burning wood. The softwood, the pine and spruce and fir that make up most of the forest, burns faster and throws more sparks and is not ideal for a hearth you are tending through a cold night. You learn this from the woman who lives on the neighboring farm, whose name is Anne. Anne is 32 years old. She came to New France 7 years ago. She is not a Filles du Roi. She came with her husband, a carpenter who is now a farmer, which is to say a man who came here knowing one thing and had to learn another. She has 4 children, 3 of whom are still living. She is one of the most competent people you have ever met. She arrives at your door the 3rd day after you arrive, carrying a small pot of beans already cooked. She says, "I thought you might not have had time to get a pot going." She says it without making it an imposition, without making it charity. It is the statement of a practical person who knows what the first week in a new house is like. You invite her in. She looks at the house with the trained eye of someone who has lived through several Quebec winters and knows what a house needs. She looks at the window. She says, "You want to stuff that shutter frame with something before November. Moss, rags, anything, or the cold will find its way in." She looks at the fireplace. She says, "The draw is good. That is a well-built hearth." She looks at the sleeping platform. She says nothing about it, but you see her assess its height off the ground and approve. She stays for 2 hours. In 2 hours, she tells you more useful things than anyone has told you since you left Paris. September in the valley is beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with anything you knew before. The light is different, lower and more golden than August, angled differently, striking the maple trees in a way that turns them colors you have no previous name for. The red of a Quebec maple in late September is not a color that exists in Paris. It is not a color that exists in the whole of France, which has its own maples, but not in this density, not in this light. You stand outside the house one morning with the axe in your hand, and you look at the forest going red and orange across the river, and you cannot look away. Jean sees you looking. He says, "It does that every year." He says it the way people say things about a place they love and know well. You say, "How long does it last?" He says, 3 weeks, maybe. Then the leaves fall. Then winter. October comes. The leaves fall, which is to say they fall all at once, and the world changes overnight from color to gray. The trees are bare, and the sky above them is the specific gray of a sky that is deciding whether or not to snow. The temperature drops, not quickly, gradually, the way a door closes when no one is in a hurry to close it. One morning, the water in the basin is cold in a new way, a way that suggests it is considering becoming ice. Not yet, but considering. Jean makes his final preparations for the winter. He brings in the last of the vegetable garden, turnips and carrots and onions, which go into the root cellar he has dug beneath the house, accessed through a hatch in the floor near the fireplace. The root cellar is roughly 2 meters deep and lined with stone, and it holds cold well enough to preserve vegetables through the winter, as long as the temperature inside the cellar stays above freezing, which it mostly does, insulated as it is by the earth around it. He shows you what is there: 3 bushels of turnips, 2 of carrots, 1 of onions, a crock of salt pork, 2 crocks of preserved fish, dried peas, dried beans, a small amount of dried corn. You look at all of it. You do the math in your head. It is not the math of plenty. It is the math of enough, which is a different calculation. one that requires knowing how much a person needs per day to stay functional and working, and dividing that into what is available, and arriving at a number of days, and hoping the number of days is more than the days of winter. Jean has done this math before. He says the stores are sufficient. He says it plainly and without false comfort, which you appreciate. He is not a man who offers false comfort. You have noticed this about him in the weeks since you married. He tells you what is true. Sometimes this is hard to hear, and he tells it anyway. The day Jean leaves is in early November. You knew it was coming. He told you the morning you arrived that he would leave before the first deep snow, that he needed to get to Montreal to settle accounts with the company agents before the river iced and trade ceased for the season. He told you he would be gone for 3 weeks, perhaps 4, and then he would return and be here through the winter. 3 weeks, perhaps 4. You stand in the doorway of the house and watch him go. He has a pack on his back, and he is walking toward the dock where a canoe is waiting. He does not look back, not because he does not care, but because looking back makes leaving harder, and the leaving is necessary, and there is no way to make it easier by making it slower. The forest closes around the path. You go back inside. You close the door. The house is the same house. The fireplace, the table, the 2 chairs, the shelf with its objects, the root cellar below the floor with its counted stores. Everything is where it was this morning. The only thing that has changed is that the other chair is empty. You put wood on the fire, and you sit in your chair, and you listen to the house. A house alone makes sounds you do not notice when there is another person in it. The settling of the logs, the wind finding the small gaps in the chinking, the fire breathing in the hearth, the mouse, you have not managed to catch it, moving somewhere in the corner near the shelf. These sounds are the sounds of the house talking to itself, and you are now the only person who can hear it. This is the first time in your life you have ever been truly alone. In the Hôpital Général, there were always 40 women in the room. On the ship, there were 131 of you in a vessel the size of a large house. In the Ursuline convent, there were 8 women in your dormitory. Even the house with Jean has had Jean in it. Now there is only you. You notice something, sitting by the fire in the empty house, that surprises you. The noticing takes a few days to become clear, but it becomes clear. You are not afraid of this. You are not comfortable in a way that means easy. The empty chair is real, and the 3 weeks feel long. But the alone itself does not frighten you. The Hôpital Général taught you something about living inside your own head. 9 years of institutional life, where privacy was never available and inner quiet had to be constructed from within, have given you a particular resource. You know how to be with yourself. You bank the fire before bed the way Jean showed you. You draw the ash forward over the embers and build up the sides to hold the heat inside. A correctly banked fire holds viable coals for 6 to 8 hours. If you do it right, you can restart the morning fire from last night's embers instead of striking sparks from flint, which takes time and patience and cold hands. You do it right. The first week passes, then the second. There is something else Anne told you in Quebec City at the wedding. She told you about the Iroquois. You have been thinking about it since you arrived in Trois-Rivières, and thinking about it more since Jean left, because when Jean was here the subject had a different weight. There was a person in the house with an axe and knowledge of this land. And now you are alone, and the subject has become a different kind of weight entirely. The Haudenosaunee, the people the French call the Iroquois, have been at war, intermittently and then not so intermittently, with the French and their indigenous allies since the earliest years of the colony. The conflict is not simple, and the word war does not quite cover it. It is raids and counter-raids, the destruction of crops and outlying settlements, the taking of captives. Trois-Rivières has had incidents. 2 years ago, farms on the east side of the settlement were burned. The palisade was extended after that. This year the king sent the Carignan-Saliers regiment, over 1,000 soldiers from France, arriving in the summer, the largest military force this colony has ever seen. They are here specifically because the situation had become untenable. The Iroquois raids had reached a point where the colony's survival was genuinely in question. The regiment's arrival has quieted things for now. The forts being built on the Richelieu River, south of Montreal, are meant to block the main raiding routes from the south. You know this because Anne told you. You know it because the men at the wedding in Quebec City spoke about it. You know it in the abstract, colonial policy sense. What you know in the immediate sense is this: you do not go beyond the edge of the cleared land after dark. You do not go into the tree line alone, at any hour. The palisade of the town is a 15-minute walk. You know which neighbors are close enough to hear you if you needed to be heard. This is not paranoia. This is the ordinary situational awareness of a woman living on the frontier of a contested territory. And every woman you have met here carries it with the same matter-of-fact steadiness with which they carry everything else. You carry it too. Anne comes twice a week. She brings her youngest child, who is 4 and who is at the age where everything is interesting, and who examines every corner of your house with complete attention. You give the child a piece of dried apple from the store, and the child holds it and looks at it, and then eats it with great seriousness. Anne teaches you things. She teaches you how to make the flat cornbread, galette, that the settlers have learned from the indigenous peoples of the valley. You mix dried corn flour with water and a little salt, and you press it flat and cook it on the hearthstone directly. It is not like bread. It is denser and grainier, and it fills the stomach in a different way. You eat it with salt pork, and it is enough. She teaches you how to manage the fire overnight in deep cold. She says, when the temperature drops below a certain point, you will know it because the house will tell you. You will wake in the night because the cold has reached you through the blankets. When that happens, you add wood, and you do not go back to sleep until the fire is established. She says the fire is your life, not in a dramatic sense, in a literal sense. Do not let it go out. You do not let it go out. The cold arrives in the 3rd week. It does not arrive gradually the way October's cold arrived. It arrives in a night, a front moving down from the north, from the unimaginable north that stretches from here to a pole you have never seen and cannot conceive of, and the temperature drops 20 degrees between midnight and dawn. You wake because the cold has found you through your 2 blankets and Jean's fur robe that you have put on top of them. You lie there for a moment, assessing the situation, and then you get up and put wood on the fire. The wood catches. You stand in front of the fire in your shift, and you wait for the room to warm, and you look at the frost that has formed on the inside of the shutter. The inside, the cold has moved through the wood of the wall and through the shutter frame, and condensed on the interior surface as ice. You remember what Anne told you about stuffing the shutter frame with rags, and you think, I should have done that already. In the morning, when the light comes and the temperature has not risen, you stuff the shutter frame with rags. The cold in Quebec in November is not like cold in Paris. Cold in Paris is damp. It gets inside your clothing and stays, and the dampness makes 5 degrees feel like -5. The cold here is dry. It is a different category of cold. It is cold that means business. The air at -15 is so dry it crackles when you breathe it. You can feel your nostrils doing something they have never done before, stiffening slightly with each inhale, the moisture in your breath condensing instantly when you step outside into a small white cloud. You go outside every day, regardless. The animals need tending. Jean left 2 chickens and a small black dog that came with the property when he received the land grant. The chickens are in a small wooden structure against the south wall of the house, kept from freezing by a thick layer of straw and their own collective warmth. You check them in the morning. You feed them dried corn from the store, a small handful each day, rationed carefully because the corn must last until spring. They give you 2 eggs some days and 1 egg other days, and some days none. The eggs are a small, reliable good thing in the daily accounting. The dog is called Noir. He is large enough to be useful and old enough to be dignified, and he sleeps near the fire on a pile of old sacking. At night he moves to the foot of the sleeping platform and stays there. You did not decide to be grateful for the dog. You simply found that you were. It is in the 4th week of Jean's absence, on a morning when the frost has come again, and the sky is the flat white of coming snow, that you understand something has changed in your body. You have been noticing it for 2 weeks, a particular heaviness, a nausea in the mornings that passes by midday, a sensitivity in your body that is new, that belongs to something growing rather than something going wrong. You are not certain. You have no one to ask except Anne. And when Anne comes on Wednesday, you do not say anything. You wait another week. Then you say something. Anne is sitting across the table from you, with her hands wrapped around a cup of hot water, with dried herbs steeped in it, mint and something else, a local herb she has learned from a woman she will not name directly, but whose knowledge she clearly respects. She listens to what you describe. She asks 2 questions. She sits back. She says, yes, I would say yes. You sit with this for a moment. Then you say, John will be home soon. Anne says he will be glad. You nod. The fire is burning well. The frost on the shutter has retreated since you stuffed the frame with rags. Not entirely, but enough. Outside, the first snow of the season is beginning. Not a storm, just the first quiet snow. The kind that falls straight down in the absence of wind and covers everything gently and without drama. You watch it through the gap in the shutter where the rag has shifted slightly. The flakes are large and slow. They settle on the woodpile, on the path to the root cellar hatch, on the bare branches of the maple tree at the edge of the cleared land. They cover everything equally, the cleared land and the uncleared forest, the path and the ground beside the path. They do not distinguish. Jean is coming home. The winter is just beginning. And something is beginning inside you that will not be finished until spring, and perhaps not even then, and perhaps never, because these things do not finish, not really. not in the way the accounting of stores finishes or the woodpile calculation finishes. They begin, and then they keep going, and the going of them is the thing itself. The snow falls. The fire burns. You put your hands flat on the table, and you look at them. They are not the hands you had when you left Paris. 3 months in this place, and the work of them is already written in the skin. The calluses thicker at the palm, the knuckle skin rougher, a small scar on the left thumb from the hatchet that slipped in October. They are the hands of someone who is building something. Outside, the snow keeps coming down. Jean comes home in late November, not 3 weeks after he left, but 5. You do not know this until you hear the dog. Noir is sleeping near the fire when he lifts his head. Not a bark, a lift of the head and a stillness, the particular alert posture of a dog who has heard something specific and is deciding what it means. You look at him, he looks at the door, and then he gets up and walks to the door and stands there. You pick up the axe from beside the fireplace. This is not dramatic. This is what you do when someone approaches the door and you do not yet know who it is. You stand to the side of the door frame, not in front of it, and you say, "Who is there?" Jean's voice comes through the door. You set the axe down. He comes in cold in a way that is different from the cold you have been living with. Colder, as if the cold has gotten into the structure of him and not just the surface. He has been outside for 2 days of hard travel. The last stretch on foot when the canoe route became impassable with new ice. His beard has grown out fully now, and there is frost in it, and his hands, when he pulls off his gloves, are cracked at every knuckle and reddened past the wrist. You put water on for heating. You say nothing about the extra 2 weeks. He says, "The company accounts took longer than expected." He says it in the tone of someone who knows this is not adequate and also knows that it is what it is. The company he is referring to is the Compagnie des Indes Occidentales, the Company of West Indies, which holds the monopoly on the fur trade in New France. Every coureur de bois who works independently, as Jean does, operates in a complicated relationship with this company. The company controls the prices paid for pelts at the Montreal market. A prime beaver pelt, castor grass, the worked pelt that has been worn against skin long enough to have its outer guard hairs worn away, leaving only the soft underfur that hat makers in Paris and London want, fetches between 3 and 4 livres at the Montreal market. A single good trading season in the interior can produce 200 or 300 pelts. The math is not complicated. The risk is what the math cannot account for. The weather, the river conditions, the shifting politics between indigenous nations, the possibility of losing the entire season's take to accident or theft, or the company's periodic crackdowns on unlicensed traders. Jean has been lucky so far. He has not been unlucky, which in this trade amounts to the same thing. You say, "There is salt pork in the pot." He sits down at the table. The pack he has brought back is considerable. He sets it by the door and unpacks it over the next half hour. A length of thick wool cloth, dark blue, enough for a coat. A small bag of tea, which is expensive and rare in this colony. A piece of beeswax. A new knife with a better edge than the one on the shelf, and at the bottom of the pack, wrapped in cloth, a piece of hard maple sugar candy. He sets it on the table in front of you without saying anything. You look at it. Then you tell him. Jean sits very still for a moment after you tell him. His hands are flat on the table. He is looking at the fire. Then he looks at you with an expression that takes a moment to read because it is not one thing. It is relief and something like wonder and something else that is more complicated, that has to do with the country he has chosen and the risks that country carries and the fact that you are here at this table in this house that he built, and now there is something else. He says, when? You say spring, late spring. He nods. He picks up his spoon and eats. This is how it is. Not silence, not suppression, just the particular economy of a person who processes things internally and then moves forward. You have been learning to read this in him over the months since the wedding. He does not speak when there is nothing useful to say, and he does not speak to fill space. At first, this was disorienting. You had spent 9 years in an institution where the absence of conversation was itself significant, a sign of disapproval or trouble. You have learned that in John it means simply that he is thinking. The winter that follows Jean's return is the first winter you survive together, and it is, as Catherine in Quebec City promised, the hardest thing you have ever done. December. The temperature in December drops to a sustained cold that has no equivalent in your previous life. At night it reaches 30 degrees below freezing by the Réaumur scale that the French use. Temperatures so low that the sap in the living trees contracts and the trees crack with sounds like rifle shots in the still air. You hear this at night, lying on the sleeping platform under every covering you own. The fur robe on top, Jean's body warm beside you. The cracking of the trees in the cold is a sound that the first time it happens startles you upright. The second time you lie still and listen to it. Jean says, the trees are talking. You say, what are they saying? He says that it is cold. You say you had gathered that. This is the closest to humor that the deep winter allows. There is not much space for humor in a Quebec December. The days are short. By the winter solstice, the sun rises after 8 and sets before 4, giving you 7 or 8 hours of pale gray daylight and 16 hours of dark. During the dark hours, the fire is the only light. You learn to use that light, to work close to it, to mend things, to prepare food, to think. The dark is not the enemy, it is simply the condition. The work of a Quebec winter is essentially the work of surviving it. Wood. The woodpile is your first daily concern. You go through wood faster in December than you did in November, because the cold is deeper and the fire must be larger and kept burning longer through the night. Jean added to the woodpile when he returned 3 more days of cutting and splitting, and you are grateful for those 3 days now. You watch the pile with the practiced eye of someone who has learned to count things that matter. Food. The stores in the root cellar are holding. The salt pork, the dried peas, the turnips and carrots. You manage them carefully, knowing they must last until the ice goes out in spring and the supply canoes can move again. The chickens are still alive, which is something. They need their small daily ration of corn, but they give back eggs, and the eggs are the difference between a meal that only fills the stomach and a meal that also satisfies it in some other way. Water. In the deep cold, the river ice is thick enough to walk on, which means you cannot draw water from the river. Jean shows you where the spring is. A small seep in the hillside behind the house that stays liquid even in the worst cold because it comes from deep enough in the ground to carry some of the earth's warmth. It is 15 minutes from the house. You go every other day with 2 wooden pails, and you come back with water that is cold but not frozen. And you do this through every degree of cold the winter produces. January is the worst month. The cold in January reaches a point where going outside requires a specific kind of preparation. You have acquired, since arriving, a pair of moccasins, not made by you, bought at the market in Trois-Rivières from a Huron man who was selling them for trade goods. The moccasins are made from moose hide, smoked and worked soft, lined with rabbit fur. They are the warmest thing on your feet that exists, and they exist because the indigenous peoples of this territory have had 10,000 years to learn what keeps a human foot alive in this cold, and the French have had 60 years, and the knowledge gap is very clear on the question of winter footwear. Jean wears moccasins too. He has worn them for years. He learned many things from the people he trades with, and footwear is one of them. You also have a capote, a long blanket coat, in the style the French traders have adopted, made from heavy point-striped trade wool, wind-resistant and warm in a way that your French clothing simply is not. This was acquired in Montreal by Jean before he returned, and it was the most useful thing in the pack he brought home. More useful even than the tea, though you would not tell him that. In January, you rarely go further than the woodpile, the chicken house, and the spring. Jean goes further. He goes to the town, to the market when it is open twice a week, to the mill when there is grinding to be done, to the neighbors when they need an extra set of hands or when they have something to trade. He knows this landscape in a way that you are still acquiring, not just the names of things, but their behavior, their winter temperament, which paths stay passable and which fill with drifts, where the ice on the river is solid and where it is not. He is teaching you, not in formal lessons, in the passing along of observations. He says things like, "Do you see how the snow is heavier on the east side of the woodpile? That means the wind is coming from the northwest tonight." Or, "Look at the color of the sky in the early morning. When it is that yellow, the temperature will rise by noon." These are the readings of a man who has spent years paying attention to this specific piece of the world, and you collect them the way you collected everything useful in the Hôpital Général, quietly, completely, without making a show of the collecting. February. Something happens in February that you did not anticipate. You begin to know the winter from inside it. This is different from surviving it. Surviving it means enduring something external that is trying to defeat you. Knowing it from inside means understanding it as a system, seeing its logic, its pattern, the way it operates according to rules that are consistent and therefore learnable. By February, you can read the signs Jane reads. Not all of them, not yet, but some of them. You can feel in the air before you step outside whether it is a dangerous cold or simply a cold cold. And the difference between those two things is the difference between taking precautions and not needing to. The baby moves for the first time in February. It is evening. You are sitting near the fire mending the knee of Jean's winter breeches, where the wool has worn thin from kneeling on ice. The fire is well built, and the room is as warm as the room gets in February, which is warm enough. Jean is reading He Can Read, which is one of the things about him that you did not know before you chose him, and have been learning since. He reads slowly and carefully, mouthing the words slightly, from a battered copy of something religious that he has had for years. The movement is not dramatic. It is a small, certain shift, internal, unmistakable once you know what it is. You put your hand on your belly over your clothes, and you hold it there and wait, and it happens again. You say nothing for a moment. Then you say, "John." He looks up. You tell him what happened. His face does the thing it does when he receives news that requires a moment, the stillness, the internal processing, then the emergence of whatever is true. What is true this time is uncomplicated. He sets down his book. He crosses the small room and he puts his hand where yours was, and you both wait. It happens again. He says nothing, but his hand stays there for a long time. March brings the false promise of spring, which you will come to know as one of the cruelties of this climate. The days lengthen, the light has a different quality, the cold eases slightly, and then winter comes back for another 3 weeks, as if to remind you who is in charge. Jean warned you about this. You were grateful for the warning, but it does not entirely blunt the disappointment of the first warm day in March, followed by a March blizzard that keeps you inside for 4 days with the snow against the door to a depth that requires digging out from inside. You dig out from inside. Then April. The ice goes out of the river in mid-April. Not quietly, but with noise, the cracking and groaning of ice that has been 3 feet thick and is now breaking under its own weight, and the pressure of the water rising beneath it. You hear it from the house. You go out to the river path and you watch it. The ice breaks in massive plates, and the plates tilt and grind against each other, and the river, freed after 5 months, moves fast and dark beneath them. Jean stands beside you watching. He says, "There it is." The river is open. The supply canoes will come now. Fresh goods from Quebec City, flour, salt, tools, medicines. The market will fill again. The thin edge of late winter ration, the moment in March when you looked at what was left in the root cellar and did the math and arrived at a number that was workable but not comfortable, is past. With the river open, there is also the matter of the land. Jean's 12 arpents were granted to him under the seigneurial system, the feudal land tenure arrangement that France has transplanted to New France, in which a seigneur, a lord, holds a large block of land granted by the crown, and then grants individual strips of that land to settlers called censitaires. Jean is a censitaire. He owes his seigneur an annual payment called the cens, a small symbolic rent, plus certain labor obligations, and the seigneur in return is responsible for maintaining the common mill and the common oven and the other shared infrastructure of the settlement. In practice, in 1664, the seigneurial system in New France is looser than its French model. There are not enough people for anyone to be too strict about it. The seigneur who holds the land Jean farms is in Quebec City and is occupied with his own affairs, and the cens gets paid when it gets paid. What Jean owes in labor he owes to the land itself. 4 arpents cleared in however many years he has been here, 8 to go. The clearing of an arpent of Quebec forest, the cutting, the burning, the stump removal, the first rough plowing of a soil that has never been plowed, takes one person working hard approximately 1 full season. You have arrived with the intention of having this land support you, which means there is work to do that cannot wait for the right moment. The clearing begins in April. Jean cuts, you pile the brush. The brush is burned when it is dry enough. Great smoky fires on calm days when the wind will not spread the flames into the standing trees. The smell of burning brush is the smell of land being changed, of a forest becoming a field, and it will be in your clothes and your hair for weeks, and you will not mind. You are not thinking about France. You have made it through the winter. This knowledge arrives not as elation. You are too tired and too large with the coming child for elation, but as something quieter, a settlement, a confirmation of something you suspected about yourself in the autumn, when you were alone in the house with the first snow falling, that you could do this. You could do this. May. The child comes on a Tuesday in late May, 3 weeks before you expected it, in a way that does not follow the orderly schedule you had arranged in your mind. Anne is there. She came when you sent for her, arriving quickly, with the competent and unsentimental manner of a woman who has done this before and knows that sentiment is not what the moment requires. Jean is sent to wait outside, which he does, and you are aware of him there on the other side of the log wall, while the long hours of the labor pass. The midwifery in New France in 1663 is largely practiced by experienced settler women like Anne. There is no trained physician in Trois-Rivières. There is a Jesuit brother who has some medical knowledge, and whom Jean went to fetch, and who arrived and stood at the edge of the room and said the appropriate prayers, and was otherwise a bystander. What Anne knew, and what her hands knew, was sufficient. The child is born before midnight. A girl. She is small and red and furious about being where she is, which you take as a good sign. Anne wraps her and hands her to you, and you hold her, and she is warm in the way that only living things are warm, not the warmth of a fire or a blanket, but the warmth that comes from inside, from the small engine of a body running at full speed. Jean comes in. He stands in the doorway for a moment. Then he comes and sits on the edge of the platform, and he looks at her. He says her name. You had agreed on a name months ago in January by the fire, Marie-Anne, after you and after Anne, who is here, which is both practical and true. He says it quietly. Marie-Anne. She stops crying when she hears it. Not because she understands it, because the voice is new and the voice is calm and she is listening to the world she has arrived in with the full attention of something that has not yet learned to be distracted. Outside, the May evening is warm. The trees are leafing out, the new leaves the pale yellow-green of early spring, and the light through the window is long and golden in the way of May evenings in the St. Lawrence Valley. And there are birds. You have been noticing the birds coming back since April. The geese first, and then the smaller birds, their voices filling the mornings in a way the winter never had. The fire is low. You don't need it much tonight. The room is warm enough on its own. Jean is still sitting on the edge of the platform, not moving, watching his daughter learn to breathe the air of this particular place, this river valley, this colony, this 40-year-old experiment in building a French civilization at the edge of a continent that was not waiting for it and did not ask for it, and has its own ancient logic that the colony is only beginning to comprehend. She will grow up knowing the winter from inside it. She will know the name of the wind that comes from the northwest. She will know the color of the sky that means the temperature will rise by noon. She will know the trees along the St. Maurice River by the way they move in summer. She will know the sound of the ice going out in April. She will know this place the way you are beginning to know it, not as a place you arrived at, but as a place you are from. You hold her, and the fire breathes, and outside the river runs in the dark toward the sea. You are not thinking about France. You are here. Summer comes to the St. Lawrence Valley the way everything comes here, completely, without qualification, as if the season has been waiting just beyond the tree line and has now decided to arrive all at once. The heat in June is not the damp gray heat of Paris in summer. It is dry and direct, and the sky above the valley is a blue so deep it looks painted. The flies come with it, black flies and mosquitoes in numbers that no one in France warned you about, because there is no equivalent in France and therefore no language for it. You learn quickly that certain hours of the day are worse than others, and that smoke helps, and that the Huron woman who sells dried herbs at the Trois-Rivières market has a preparation of cedar and sweetgrass that, when rubbed on the skin, reduces the worst of it. You buy it without hesitation. You use it every morning. Her name is Kateri. She comes to the market on Tuesdays with a basket and a younger woman who may be her daughter, and she sells the herb preparation and dried plants you do not know the names of, and occasionally a smoked fish that is unlike any smoked fish you have eaten before. You have bought from her 4 times now. You do not share a language beyond pointing and gesture and a handful of French words she has picked up from years of market trading, but you understand each other clearly enough to conduct business and, occasionally, to communicate something slightly more than business. One Tuesday in June she looks at you. You have Marie-Anne strapped to your front in a length of cloth, the way you saw another settler woman do it, leaving your hands free. And she looks at the baby and she says something in her own language, and then, in French, "Good." You say thank you. She nods. You carry Marie-Anne home through the summer morning, the baby's weight against your chest, and you think about that word, good, stated simply, without elaboration, by someone who has watched this valley and this settlement and its imported population for decades, and has her own accounting of what good means and what it does not. You take it as offered. The summer is work. The clearing continues on the 8th and 9th arpents of Jean's land. He works the land in the mornings before the heat peaks, and you work alongside him when the baby can be left with Anne, which Anne offers without being asked, because Anne has an accurate understanding of what a new mother trying to clear forest needs, which is someone to hold the baby. In the afternoons you tend the kitchen garden, a plot behind the house where you grow turnips, carrots, onions, and this year, for the first time, a small amount of the corn that Anne showed you how to plant in the indigenous manner, in mounds, with beans climbing the stalks and squash spread between them to hold moisture in the soil. This method of planting, which the French settlers have learned from their indigenous neighbors, produces more food per acre than the European method of flat rows and requires less labor because the plants support each other. You learn this, and you use it, and you do not spend time being surprised that the people who have been farming this soil for generations have learned things about it that Europeans have not. Jean is in the field by 6 in the morning. You are in the kitchen garden by 8. Marie-Anne sleeps in a wooden cradle Jean made during the February darkness. A good cradle, solid, with a curved bottom so it rocks. She sleeps more than you expected. She is growing faster than you expected. By July, she is looking at things with intention, following movement with her eyes, reaching her hands toward whatever is nearby. You put maple leaves in front of her. She looks at them. You think she will know what these are before she knows what an oak leaf is. She will grow up knowing the maples the way you are still learning them, not as a category of tree, but as individuals, the particular maple at the edge of the cleared land that turns first in autumn, the stand of maples along the path to the spring that hold their color longest. She will know them by the way you know the streets of your childhood parish in Paris, not because you studied them, but because they were there every day. This strikes you as important in a way you do not entirely have words for. August comes, and the summer is at its peak, and Jean begins preparing for the trading season. This is the second time you have watched him prepare to leave, and it is different from the first. Not easier. You are aware of what his absence means in a way that was still abstract the first time. But you are not standing at the edge of an unknown thing. You are standing at the edge of a known thing, and the knowledge changes it. He will go to the interior. He will be gone until November at least. He will travel by canoe up the St. Lawrence and then up the Ottawa River and into the Pays d'Onho, the upper country of the Great Lakes, where the Huron and the Algonquin trade, where the forests are deeper than anything within 3 days of here, where the beaver populations are still abundant in ways they no longer are in the valleys that have been trapped for 60 years. He has been making this journey, or versions of it, for 8 years. He knows the river the way he knows his own hands. He knows the men he trades with and the protocols of that trade. The gift-giving that must come before any transaction, the ceremonies that establish trust, the careful navigation of relationships between indigenous nations that have their own histories and tensions entirely independent of the French presence. He speaks Huron well enough to trade in it. He is learning Algonquin. The morning he leaves, he holds Marianne for a long time. She looks at his face with the serious attention she gives to everything. She has your habit of looking at things without immediately deciding what to do about them. He says something to her quietly that you do not hear. Then he hands her to you and picks up his pack and goes. You stand in the doorway and watch him go, and this time you do not feel the weight of aloneness the way you felt it last November. What you feel is different. A kind of settled recognition. He is going. He will come back. The winter is coming. You will manage it. These things are true, and they are the shape of the life you have chosen. And the choosing was real, and the life is real, and the management is yours. You go back inside. September is for preparation, and September is beautiful. The maples are turning. You knew they would. You saw it last year from this same ground. But seeing it again does not make it smaller. The particular red of this specific maple at the edge of the field is the same red it was last year. And it is different because you are different, because you have a year inside you now, because you know what comes after the red. You know what comes after the red. This is the line between a newcomer and someone who belongs to a place. Not the knowing of facts. You knew facts about Quebec before you arrived. You were told things. You were briefed. The line is the body knowledge, the cold that comes after the leaves fall, the specific quality of November light, the sound the ice makes when it is thick enough to walk on. The way your hands know without instruction to bank the fire a certain way on certain nights. This knowledge is in you now. It arrived without ceremony, deposited by the year into your bones and hands, and the part of your mind that does not think in words. There is a family who camps at the edge of the woodlot in September, an Algonquin family, a man and woman and 3 children who pass through this area every year on their way to their winter hunting grounds. Jean knows them. He has traded with the man, whose name, rendered into French syllables, sounds something like Makwa, for years. They stop for 2 days, and Jean shares food with them, and they share food with Jean, and there is a conversation conducted in the mixture of Algonquin and French and gesture that constitutes Jean's main trading language. The woman, you do not learn her name, the introduction does not go that far, looks at Marie-Anne with the same quality of assessment that Kateri at the market used. She says something to her husband. He says something back. Jean translates. Partially, she says the baby is strong. You say, thank you. The woman looks at you then, not at the baby, at you. The look lasts only a moment, and it is not unfriendly, and it is not simple. It is the look of someone reading something, taking in information, making a judgment about what she sees. Then she looks away. You think about that look for days afterward. You are still thinking about it in November when the snow comes. You are not certain what she saw, but you have a sense, unverifiable, intuitive, the kind of knowledge that the body arrives at without the mind's assistance, that what she saw was someone who is trying to learn how to be in this place, and that this was neither remarkable nor insufficient. It was simply where you are. You stack wood through September. More than last year, you have a better sense now of what 3 chords means in real February nights, and you add a 4th chord, because the 4th chord is the chord that means you are not calculating anxiously in January, you are simply warm. Jean left you the axe and the wedge, and you split what you cannot carry whole, and the work of it is something you have come to understand differently than you did a year ago. The weight of the axe is familiar now, the angle of the split, the way certain wood grain runs straight and certain wood grain does not, and what that means for the wedge. Your hands know this. You go to the market in Trois-Rivières every Tuesday through September. You sell the surplus from the kitchen garden, turnips and carrots and onions and the dried beans from the corn and bean mounds that produced more than you can store. You buy what you cannot make, salt, needles, a small amount of tea from the last of the trading ships before the river season closes. You talk to the other women at the market. Not just Anne now. You know faces, you know names, you know who is in their 2nd year and who is in their 5th, and who came as a Filles du Roi and who came with a husband, and who built what they have from almost nothing. There are more Filles du Roi this year than last. The ships have been coming. A woman named Suzanne arrived in August with the 2nd group of the season. She is 17 and from Lyon, and she married a farmer on the South Shore within a week of arriving, and she looks at you at the market with the expression you recognize from your own face a year ago, the expression of someone who has arrived somewhere real and is beginning to understand that the arriving was only the beginning. You tell her what Anne told you. You tell her quickly, in the order of urgency. Get the wood in before November, more than you think you need, and then more again. Stuff the shutter frames before the first frost, not after. The spring behind the hill stays liquid through the worst cold. The corn and bean method works. The cedar and sweetgrass preparation from the Huron woman at the Tuesday market is real and worth the trade goods. She listens with complete attention. You think, this is how it moves. Not from books, not from officials, not from the company administrators in Quebec City who have never wintered in a house with a packed earth floor. From woman to woman at a market in September before the cold comes, the same way it came to you from Catherine at the wedding, from Anne at the door with a pot of beans. You were the one who didn't know. Now you are the one who does. There is a woman in Quebec City who has been writing this down. Her name is Marie de l'Incarnation. She is the founder of the Ursuline convent where you spent your first nights in this country, and she has been here since 1639, longer than almost any other French woman in New France, and she writes letters, an extraordinary number of letters, to her son in France, to the religious superiors in Paris, to anyone who might want to know what this place actually is, on the ground, in the cold, among the people who are building it. She writes about the Filles du Roi. She writes about the women arriving, the speed of the marriages, the conditions they find. She writes about them with the attention of someone who understands that what is happening here is historical, in the precise sense of that word, that it is happening once, and that if it is not recorded, it will be lost. She is right. The women who arrive in these first years, 1663, 1664, 1665, will not be remembered by name. There will be no monuments. What will survive is the paper record, the marriage contracts in the notarial archives, the baptismal registers in the church ledgers, the letters that Marie de l'Incarnation sends to France describing what she sees. That is enough. A line in a ledger is enough to prove that you were here, that you chose someone, that something followed from the choosing. The record does not need you to be remarkable. It only needs you to have lived. October comes, the leaves fall, the world goes gray. You know this too now. You know that the gray is not permanent. You know that on the other side of the gray is a spring that will come as certainly as the spring that came this year, and the year before that, and the 10,000 years of springs that came before any French person stood on this particular bank of this particular river. The spring is not in question. What is in question is whether you do the work that lets you meet it. You do the work. November. The first snow of the year comes on a Wednesday morning while Marie-Anne is sleeping. You step outside and it is falling. The same large, slow flakes as the first snow last year, falling straight down in the still air, settling on the woodpile and the garden and the cleared fields and the tree line. You stand in it for a moment with your face up. The cold touch of each flake is distinct and brief. Marie-Anne is 5 months old. She will not remember this winter. But the winter will be in her regardless, in the knowledge her body is building without language, in the baseline cold that a body calibrates against when it learns what cold means. She is learning here. She is learning what here means with her whole self, in the way that only the very young can learn a place, which is without distinction between self and place, without the membrane of prior knowledge that an adult brings. She is from here. You are from here. This is the thing that has been arriving gradually, without announcement, like the cold itself, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of moments. The morning you knew which maple turns first. The evening you banked the fire without thinking. The Tuesday you gave Suzanne advice at the market, and the advice was true because you had learned it with your body and not your mind. The moment in February when Jean held his hand against your belly in the cold house, and something moved. The accumulation of those moments, is what a place is made of when it is yours. You go back inside. Marie-Anne is awake now, looking at the ceiling with the focused attention of a person who has found something interesting. You pick her up, and she grabs your collar with both hands, which she has learned to do, and you hold her and stand at the window with the shutter open slightly, and you show her the snow. She looks at it. She reaches toward it with one hand. The snowflakes are too far away and too brief, and her hand finds only air. But she keeps reaching, her fingers opening and closing on nothing, trying to hold something that will not be held. You let her reach. The fire is burning well. The wood is stacked high against the east wall. The root cellar is full. Turnips, carrots, onions, salt pork, dried peas, dried beans, the dried corn that ground at the mill into a coarse flour, 2 crocks of preserved fish. You counted it last week. You counted it in the way of someone who knows what the number means, not abstractly but in days, in meals, in the specific arithmetic of a Quebec winter. The number is sufficient, more than sufficient. This year the number is more than sufficient. Jean will come home in November. He said November. He has said November before and arrived in late November and once in early December, and the river was icing then and the last stretch was on foot. He will come home when he comes home. The accounting will be settled. The pelts will be sold. He will come through the door, cold, in the deep way, and you will put water on, and you will tell him what happened while he was gone. And what happened is that his daughter learned to reach for snowflakes, and the turnips are in the cellar, and the wood is stacked, and you are here. You are still here. The valley holds the first snow of the season, and the snow holds the light, faint and even. And the river below the settlement is still running dark and fast before the freeze, and somewhere up that river, in the late autumn forest, Jean is making his way south. The fire breathes. Marie-Anne reaches for the snow. You hold her at the window, and you let the cold air come in through the gap, and you do not close the shutter yet, not yet. Just a little longer, in this moment, with the snow falling and the fire at your back, and your daughter's hand opening and closing on the cold, quiet air of the St. Lawrence Valley, in the colony of New France, in the year 1664, which is the first full year of your life in this place, which has become, without your deciding exactly when, the only place you are. The snow keeps falling. Close your eyes if you like. There is nothing left to do tonight. The wood is in, the stores are counted, the fire will hold. Let the snow fall. Let the river run. Let the cold come in its own time, which it will, which it always does, which has nothing to do with whether you are ready, and everything to do with whether you have prepared. You have prepared. Sleep now. If this story found you at the right moment, if the valley and the cold and the weight of a small life in your arms carried you somewhere quieter, Quiet History at Bedtime has more. A like, a subscribe, a notification bell. Any of those things helps this channel reach the next person who needs exactly this. Thank you for being here. Good night.